Welcome back to another edition of Building Bridges with Greg and Jill. We're so excited to have you. We have a particularly exciting program today that we feel very honored to have. It's a conversation that I think a lot of you will be fascinated by because you may not know all the levels in which currently, LDS leaders and scholars and thinkers are engaging with evangelical counterparts in various sectors of society and other arenas that may be, again, not too familiar to the general public, but we want to share that story a little bit with some very exciting and very honored guests that we would be able to do that with. Jill, would you like to greet our regular audience first before we introduce our guests?
Thank you for joining us. We're so glad to have you with us. It's kind of fun to get to know some of you and to hear your comments about our podcast. So we look forward to seeing how you like this one in particular and just hearing from you.
Yeah, excellent. Well, without further ado, we want to go right to our guest, and we are unfortunately not able to have them in studio with us today. We prefer to do that, but sometimes you got to do Zoom. So we have Zoom where we can connect two very special guests with us today. First of all, Elder Clark Gilbert. He's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints General Authority. He's in the position of the 70, and he is also currently serving as the Commissioner of Education. And we are joined as well by the brand new president starting last fall, Dr. Shane Reese, the president of Brigham Young University. And some of the things that they're involved with together with evangelical higher education people and interactions, I think you'll find very fascinating. So welcome to the program, Elder.
Thank you.
And President Reese.
Thanks for having us. We're grateful to be here.
What an honor. And, I don't know that we would have gotten President Reese. You're in high demand, brand new president. I think, what are you, the 14th president of BYU?
14th president. Yes, sir.
And I just guessed at that. I nailed it.
That was a good guess.
I just threw 14 out there. I've known some of your predecessors, so not many, but I think 3 of them I've interacted with in the past. But we're so glad to have. We probably couldn't have gotten you without Elder Reese. Elder just moved you into a general authority category. Elder Gilbert asking you to join us, so we're glad that you could be a part of it as well.
Grateful to be here.
Yeah. Well, could you both just, maybe Elder Gilbert, you go first, just kind of tell us a little about yourself and anything personal you want us to know about, just so our audience can get to know who you are.
Thank you for having us, and you two are such great ambassadors of Building Bridges, the name of the show, and I've gotten to know the Johnsons over the last few years and work with evangelical students from other schools across the country. And I currently serve as a General Authority 70. That means we leave our professional careers full-time for the church. And I really have a primary assignment to be a witness of Jesus Christ. But then my operating assignment is over the church's education. And so I supervise all of our universities and our seminary training for our students in high school, and our religious training for students who go to schools besides those in our church system. And so BYU Idaho, BYU Pathway, and we have about 180,000 college-age students in our universities, almost 500,000 more who go to our religious courses each week. And it's just a wonderful opportunity. And I have 8 kids. You've met my wife, Christine. She's remarkable. We have 4 at home still, and 3 in college and 1 out of college. And I just became a grandfather 2-3 months ago. So if I don't seem like I'm as sharp as normal, it's because I'm getting older.
No, you are very sharp. I just have the question that I'm sure everybody has in their mind after hearing that. Where do you find the time to do it all?
It is really busy, but I'm only going to have those girls who are at home for a couple more years, and I try to make their swim meets and their basketball games and their lacrosse meets, and it's wonderful. And and I've always been busy, Greg and Jill. I served as the president of BYU Idaho before this, president of BYU Pathway. I spent 10 years at the Harvard Business School, there doing my doctoral training and on the faculty. And it doesn't matter if we have a ecclesiastical calling or just a professional calling. We've always got to figure out how to put our family and our spouses first.
Sometimes evangelicals will quote a very famous LDS president of the church, David O. McKay, who I believe is rightfully credited with the phrase that no success outside the home is more important than success inside the home. And sometimes they'll quote that and not give him credit for it because he was an church prophet. And I always say, no, you got to give credit to David O. McKay.
Well, thank you. He was right. That's a great statement.
Yeah. President Reese, welcome to Building Bridges.
Oh, well, grateful for the invitation. And I like Elder Gilbert, I love just the title of your podcast. Building Bridges is such an amazing effort. And there's just so many bridges to be built, I would say. One of the things, Greg, I don't know if you remember, I was previously the academic vice president at BYU, and you and I participated in an interfaith dialogue, which was a remarkable time. And I just noted your warmth and your clear vision for how we might learn from each other, and that we often have so much more in common than we acknowledge. Certainly have things that we hold on tightly to and that are meaningful to us, but so much of that is held in common. And so that's why I'm grateful for your podcast and grateful to be a guest here today. I'm a career educator in a lot of ways. I started my career at Los Alamos National Laboratory doing nuclear weapons research. In fact, I sometimes joke that I spent the first 4 years of my career trying to destroy the world and came to higher education trying to better the world. But I've been here at BYU for about 20 years. I served for a brief time as the dean of a college here and the Science College. And then as academic vice president. I've been president now since last September was my inauguration. So I'm fairly new in the seat. I have 3 children. My wife, Wendy, is the love of my life. And she really, I've said before, she may have only one character flaw, and that's her taste in men. Other than that, she is in every way perfect. So we have just amazing kids, and she and I have made this journey together, and it's been just a great thing. She assumes a bit of responsibility as the spouse of the president of the university, and I couldn't ask for a better partner in crime. So,
well, I tell you, you stand in some very big shoes. Obviously, as the president of BYU, we're privileged to know Elder Jeffrey Holland and knew his wife Pat very well. We traveled together, been part of a number of dialogue experiences, and I know that there used to be the Pat and Jeff show.
Jeff and Pat show, yeah. I'm very familiar with the Jeff and Pat show. It is literally an unenviable position to try to replicate the Jeff and Pat show. We know we have no vain hope of ever coming close. We have great admiration for President Sister Holland, bless her soul. They've left a deep and lasting impression on our whole university community. We regularly talk about the Hollands' impact on the university, and there's just been so many other great leaders. We're humbled by the opportunity to be in this role.
Well, are you one of the younger men that have ever been called to be president of BYU?
You know, people ask me that, and not even close. President Holland was, I think, 35 when he took the reins.
Okay.
And then President Oaks, who is also a former President Oaks, who serves in the first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was also quite young when he took the reins of the university. So, I'm an old guy in the grand scheme of things.
Well, we're going to get into some of your background in relationship to the interfaith dialogue work that's going on today, because you are a statistician, and you talked about your Los Alamos. That's where the Manhattan Project was developed.
That was where the Manhattan Project was conceived, and yeah. So, but it turns out that most of the time, just as a hint to maybe your listeners, if you want to end a conversation at a party, you can tell them you're a statistician. That is where a conversation usually ends.
Well, that may be true, but you guys, you give us information that makes us believe that we're doing good things or bad things. So you have a lot to do, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's jump into our interview because we do have a number of questions that we've talked about reviewing. Elder Gilbert, you've been a part of something more recently in your tenure as the Commissioner of Education that I don't think a lot of Latter-day Saints or Evangelicals out listening to the Building Bridges program. Christian College Coalition. I believe that, am I using the right terminology or?
It's the American Council on Education, and there's a commission for faith-based universities.
Okay, and what is that called? The thing that Shirley is involved with?
Oh, so Shirley leads the Council of Christian Colleges and Universities. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So both end. There's two different
Yep.
organizations. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And recently, you and President Reese attended an event, the Christian College Consortium.
Yes.
Quite a special evening for you. And I was just wondering if you could
Oh,
tell us what that was all about and
thank you.
kind of get us launched in the conversation.
Both President Reese and I were there, and I'll have him add some additional thoughts. But it's interesting, Greg and Joe. We have for a number of years had kind of an arm's length friendship with the CCCU through Shirley Hoogstra, and many people with evangelical backgrounds know Shirley. She's just been a great leader of the Christian Colleges and Universities Coalition. And she had reached out to us personally over the years. Shirley and I had written some things together, but we'd never been invited to their annual event with all of the presidents. And, I think they have 300 university presidents, with over 500,000 Christian college student enrollments, but we've never been involved in it. And in fact, one of our friends, I think Andy Westmoreland, the former president of Samford University, he had become quite close to us, and he's like, we just got to get the LDS people and the evangelical people together more. And he's like, some of our colleagues, they're not sure if they trust the LDS church, but they really like their attorneys. And with all of the attacks on religious freedom, it's just brought us together and working together to protect religious liberty in America and in higher education in particular. So Shirley, for the first time, invited us as guests to the annual conference that they host. And Shane and I sat at a table with 4 or 5 presidents of evangelical colleges, Christian colleges. And Greg and Joe, I just got to tell you, people were so kind to us, and there was such a warmth. And wow, if you could have felt the spirit that evening, just as people testified of Christ and talked about the work of Christian colleges to be a resource to young people in this time where there are a lot of attacks on religion. And the music was so uplifting. And I think President Reese and I we were inspired by the quality of leadership, both intellectual and spiritual, in so many of these Christian colleges. And we were so grateful for the Christian outreach to us and how kind people were to us. And I mean, just, as ambassadors to Christian and evangelical faith, you both should be so proud of how exemplary these Christian presidents were that we met the whole evening. And President Reese, you could add more to that, but I mean, we sat next to Beck Taylor, the current president of Samford University, Phil Ryken, the president at Wheaton College, and Michael Lindsay, the president at Taylor University, and just on and on and on. And to a person, these people were smart, they were thoughtful, they were great leaders, and above all, they were followers of Christ. And it was such a good evening for me and President Reese.
Yeah, and I'll just add, if you don't mind, I was blown away. First of all, I'm a fairly new president, and Shirley Hoogstra is a remarkable leader among leaders of universities that have these strong commitments to embracing their Christian tradition. And Shirley pulled me aside as a new president, and she was warm, but had this great sense of mentoring. And she said, "These are your people."
Mhm.
And I thought, man, for a new president who's trying to learn the ropes of leading an institution that is as committed to academics as they are to reinforcing Christian discipleship, it was a remarkable thing for her to say that and offer her organization as a resource for me as a new president. I loved that. The next experience I had that is just an anecdote to reinforce what Elder Gilbert just talked about is one of the presidents, and I don't have his permission to share it. It was a personal experience, but I will say that he came up to me afterward and said, I have a daughter who is nonverbal, and one of the only things that speaks to her soul, that brings happiness to her, is a production of Amazing Grace that one of your performing arts groups at BYU has produced. And I'm sitting there thinking, I had no idea that you would even know this. And he just expressed gratitude for our commitment to share the good news of the gospel through music, and how much it touched his daughter's life. And I just thought, not only was it a warm greeting among people who hadn't met before, it wasn't just a cordial greeting. We just had this amazing common ground. And I would bet that you could have asked anyone sitting at our table, what are the differences in your religious traditions and beliefs? They could have articulated those, but it was building on the commonalities that we have, the shared commitment to our religious traditions, and the need to protect those religious freedoms. So it was a remarkable evening, and I could not endorse what Elder Gilbert's just said about our experience. It was a beautiful evening.
Real quick, just because I think I know the group, is it a female group of singers
It is.
at BYU? Do you know the name of their group?
It's noteworthy, and they sang
Noteworthy.
Amazing Grace, and yeah,
And they walk into the river, don't they? And
Yeah.
you're familiar with it. It's impressive.
everybody, stop this podcast right now. Go check out YouTube. Noteworthy, Amazing Grace. It is powerful. Oh, it's very, very powerful. Yes, I've watched it a number of times. We brought a group of students. What we continue to bring. In fact, we'll be on campus at BYU next week with a group of students from 3 different Christian colleges. The following week with 5 different universities, and we work with your religion faculty, and we have student dialogues as we do at the Institutes of Religion. I hope that you can learn more about this. I know you probably don't know all about these interactions, but one time we were up at Aspen Grove, invited by the BYU students. This is a number of years ago. And we decided to sing a song together. And we said, do we know any song that's familiar to both of us? And Amazing Grace was offered. And we sang that. I almost wept in that room. This was years ago, as we were singing amongst ourselves, Latter-day Saints and Evangelicals, who, have theological differences and various things, but we found a common chord. And that story that you just shared about that college president and his daughter, beautiful example of where we can find those common chords, those common ground places. We've talked about the Chosen. We've talked about other things like that have become new places for Latter-day Saints and Evangelicals to feel more comfortable with one another and safe with one another. I think that's been a very great blessing in recent years. So, yeah.
Yeah, we were, Elder Gilbert, you shared with us that story about the different presidents that you've been meeting with, and it just really warmed our hearts to hear this. And you mentioned another organization, the American Council of Education. What is your involvement with them, and what does that look like with?
The American Council on Education really is the leading higher education organization. It's a quasi-governmental organization, and it's historically had a secular mission. But we went to them, Shirley Hoogstra and I, and said, hey, religious schools have a big part in the the work happening in U.S. higher education. And in fact, there are over 850 religious colleges and universities in the country, and over 2 million students enrolled in religious schools. And there's a lot of great things happening and innovation happening. And we think you should help us highlight that to the rest of the academy. And Ted Mitchell, who's the president of the American Council on Education, former Undersecretary of State in the Obama administration, to his credit, said, you are right. And we need you, and we need you engaged, and you can reach people that a lot of universities can't. And that's just, he gave us a formal charge. Shirley and I chair that together. And we have Catholic universities and LDS universities, evangelical universities, Jewish universities, all working together. And of course, you pointed out that, LDS and evangelical traditions and doctrines vary. It's even more when you go to the Catholics and you go to the Jewish schools. And yet there are a few things that really bind us. And one of them is clearly religious liberty. One of them is the right of religious universities to have their own mission and not be bound by accreditors who have secular agendas. Yeah. And then another one is just legitimizing the role religious schools have. And you two will laugh at this because sometimes how religious people are covered in the media. It's not always the most fair and balanced coverage. And I was at a conference with the editor of one of the largest higher ed news organizations of the country. And he said to me, Clark, the only issues happening in religious higher education are white nationalism, LGBTQ issues, and curriculum focused on cutting out evolutionary theory. And I remember saying to him, hey, you've got to get out. there are so many other wonderful stories. And this led to meetings with me and Shirley and him. Last year, I went and met with their whole editorial board. And I talked about the work we're doing with BYU Idaho to lower cost of higher education, and BYU Pathway to open access, and BYU Hawaii to reach multicultural students. And they finally said, okay, we admit there's other stories besides white nationalism and LGBTQ issues. And then they literally said, but this isn't because of your religious mission. You just have good governance and talented people. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, let's look at both of those. Why would our faculty give up their governance to churches unless they believe in the first place? Mm-hmm. And why would talented people leave Harvard and Yale and Stanford and come work at these church schools unless they were believers? And I told the story of one of our vice presidents at BYU Pathway, and I said to him, yeah, he came from one of these Silicon Slopes firms where he was a leading technologist, and we said, hey, we'll match your salary all but the 7th digit. And and I said, look, people don't do that unless they have religious conviction. Mm-hmm. And so this coming June, Shirley and I will be hosting an event in DC with probably 70 or 80 college presidents from Notre Dame and Yeshiva and Samford University and all Evangelical School, Samford University and Wheaton College, and all over the country. And we'll be defending the right of religious schools to have religious mission and protect their religious liberty and their accreditation. And it's just been a great unified effort where we say, hey, we all have religious differences and doctrinal differences. That's a given. But we believe in the Constitution. We believe in religious liberty. We believe in the right to religious mission. And in a growing secular world, we're going to stand up for each other. And it's been a beautiful interaction with so many people of different faith backgrounds.
You know, just to jump in here, maybe our audience that's listening in on this conversation isn't as aware of why these good reports that you're both sharing are as remarkable as they are. They would just think, well, that's great that they're meeting with presidents and the LDS church is being more involved, and that's great. You mentioned that for years the evangelicals in higher education appreciated the LDS legal contribution to defending religious liberty and various other matters of law that are so important, both the LDS and the traditional Christian community. But then you said that some voices began to emerge and said, but we need to get to know you. We need to include you. And so that's why this is significant. And it moves us from just being collaborators on common cause for good. Religious freedom in America is a constitutional value, a First Amendment right, a privilege that we hold high in this country, and that's great. But moving us from that place of just common cause to engaging relationally and discovering this guy doesn't have horns after all. This person's not a monster or a strange person or a bizarre person. You know, we have found this with our student dialogue that's been going on. It started at BYU in 2003. We've been there every spring since then with the Institutes of Religion. We'll be at 5 different Institutes of Religion this next couple weeks at the invitation of the CES department and the welcome of that. And what's remarkable is that it's moving from common cause to interpersonal relationship. I'll be with Shirley next week at a board meeting, the week that we're recording, a board meeting at Iowa University in Southern California for the National Association of Evangelicals. And a fairly significant experience is being crafted, even as we speak right now, between leading evangelical theological minds, scholarly minds, and pastors with Latter-day Saint general authorities that we hope to see happen later this year. So there's something is emerging from common cause to relationship. I wonder if either of you or both of you want to speak to the importance.
Shane, I'll respond in a minute, but President Reese, I mean, why don't you describe just how some of these friendships have grown for you over time, and then I'll add to that.
Yeah, it's a great point, Greg, that this does go beyond just common cause, which, by the way, the common causes are important and something that we have to continue to focus on. I think we will find such great common ground when we look at the common causes that we might all be promoting and supporting. But you know, I just thought, I think in terms of anecdotes so often, and one of the things that I think that we, by being invited and included to be part of the gala, which really was just a forum for us to develop the kinds of relationships that you talked about, was we saw some incredible work by one of the universities. They acknowledge a student or an alumni contribution that happened, and she had developed an entire school setup for special needs, highly autistic students that she set up on her own, that was built on the foundations of Christian principles. And it was such a moving example. And that gave me such an incredible understanding of their vision for how faith can strengthen an educational mission, that these aren't mutually exclusive or competing demands. They actually reinforce one another, that the faith tradition strengthens the academics of these institutions. And that's certainly something that I've been trying to talk to our university community about, is that we're better off. We're not going to succeed in spite of our religious mission. It's going to be because of our religious mission and leaning into that. And I loved that I got to experience and develop a relationship with a university president who feels that exact same way and can demonstrate how those are mutually reinforcing concepts in their setting. And it is those opportunities where we're gathered together, where we spend time with one another, that those relationships are built and that the understanding is increased. And I think it really is one of these where the rising tides raises all ships. We get to see what's the wonderful things going on. And that's part of what made this such a magical evening for me.
Well, and Greg and Jill, you two model this so well, and the personal relationships you help sew together. And we mentioned Shirley and her remarkable outreach, and like you said, it is common cause. I remember someone was attacking us because we have a covenant statement that you sign when you join the faculty, and someone was criticizing us and saying, you can't do this, this isn't legal. And Shirley Hoekstra, within 24 hours, had 4 university presidents coming to our defense saying, yeah, we have this here and we have this here. And we do, this is absolutely, you can have an honor code and a covenant commitment for employment. And those have been amazing, but I think a lot of it's because Shirley's been such a good friend. And she came out here to Salt Lake a few years ago to attend. The church does a PBS tabernacle broadcast every year, and Shirley came to that with me 4 or 5 years ago, and she didn't have to do that, but she came and invested and found out about our families. And I'll give you other examples. Beck and Julie Taylor. Beck's the new president at Samford University. But I mean, I watched those two model Christian nurturing and goodness and be engaged and ask about our families. And Phil Ryken has been such a good friend to me over the years. And I told Phil we were working on our new general education curriculum at BYU, and we didn't want it to be just another secular university review of the literature. And he said, we just went through it and we have this whole Christ-centered approach. And so it's not that we were just in common causes, but we were learning from each other.
Yeah.
And he was inspiring to me, and the Taylors are inspiring to me, and Shirley's inspiring to me. And these aren't just people who are willing to work together, but these are inspiring people who will share and build and get to know each other on a personal level.
Can I do a quick follow-up on that? Why this is again so unique is that in the past, there's been a lot of suspicion, a lot of concern with Latter-day Saints being involved with evangelical organizations, ministries, and there's this kind of built-in suspicion and concern that there's some nefarious agenda with that. Not totally, entirely, exclusively something that the evangelicals have, but sometimes Latter-day Saints will have a little suspicion as well. We don't want to be too close, or we don't want to have these interactions because they have their agenda and vice versa. Why do you think, is it purely that the world is becoming more secular that's causing us to kind of be willing to come together, and so we have a common enemy out there that's trying to attack both? Or is there something more that maybe we might say God is doing amongst us? This is our only opinion, but is God working here, or is this just some kind of necessity for the day in which we live?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's very much increasingly the latter. And on the former, it is true. We're under more attack. We've got to bond together. We did a special issue of Deseret Magazine last year called Dare to Be Different. And I asked all of these religious university presidents, how do you stand up for your religious mission? And come on, help me out. Linda Livingstone at Baylor said, we are serious about our religious mission. And Peter Kilpatrick at Catholic University said, our religious mission is the anchor for why we run the university the way we do. And we brought those in there. And I do think the fact that we all are having to stand a little stiffening in our spine, given the attacks in the secular world, helps. But there is something deeper, and maybe we've all been humbled a little. I served my LDS mission in Japan, and we had a phrase in Japanese called Kurushi Toki no Kami Danomi, which means in difficult times we remember God. And maybe the challenges from a secular world have humbled us and made us more open, but it does feel to me like God's doing a deeper work. And and he wants us to learn from each other, to lift each other, to build each other. And that, like you said, that's much more than just common cause. It's friendship, and it's working together, and in some cases it's on all parts, probably overcoming a little bit of pride, and just, I shared with you too, I grew up in Arizona, and probably the most amazing example I had in my entire young person's life was an evangelical girl in my high school. And I so admired her. And then in the middle of that, I got kicked out of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes because I wasn't Christian. And so I had both of those experiences. And there have been times in my life I'm like, man, why would I even bother with this? These people don't like me, and they never even met me. And then I remember people like my friend Amy growing up, and I'm like, oh, there are many more people like her. And I want to be around them, and I want to learn from them. And thank goodness, I didn't let my own life experience and pride and self-importance block me from getting to know these people I've listed off today. They are amazing examples to me, and I'm so grateful that I've gotten to know them and learn from them, and I do think God's helping us all be better Christians.
Yeah.
Mhm.
President
And
Reese?
I'll just say, yeah, well, just real quickly, just a couple of thoughts, is that I do think that there may be some to kind of circling the wagons, and we've got certainly the secular world, I think, would attack those with strong religious beliefs for sure. But I'm a big believer that there are no coincidences, and I think God's hand is in a lot of what we're seeing, and that there is this banding together of those who despite differences in views on certain theological or doctrinal issues, have so much in common, and can see the warmth and strength that is produced as a result of this core institution of religion and its role in human flourishing. I just think it is no coincidence, and certainly I see and feel deeply God's hand in that. So I love that you would ask the question.
President Reese, a former senior faculty at BYU, Robert Millett, is my dear friend. We traveled together. We wrote a book together called Bridging the Divide. It's fascinating to me that going way back, we used to talk about how a friendship like ours, and as it went a little bit more public, and we did public presentations, and we traveled together, and then we got scholars meeting with scholars and students meeting with students, that 20, 30 years ago, well, at least 20 to 25 years ago, there was so much concern about compromise that if we got too close to each other, we would fall prey to the other side. And whatever those agendas were thought to be, one of the things, and I share this often because this was a quote that Bob would give. He would talk about F. Orson Whitney, a former general authority, I think of the early 1900s. Was he a member of the Quorum of the 12 or a 70? F. Orson Whitney. Do you guys recall?
I can't remember. I think he was a member of the 12, wasn't he?
I think a member of the 12 is what I think, but boy.
Well, we're going to ask somebody in the comment section to correct us on that.
Correct us if we're wrong.
But one of the things that Bob would quote him on is that in the end times, there would be a need for a great confederacy of righteousness to gather together, and it's going to have to be larger than the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And Bob would quote that. And I think it's interesting that, and again, a value that Bob and I had is that we could discuss much more of our differences and our similarities as friends than we could as adversaries. So if we position ourselves as adversaries, we can have a nice little fight, a little argument, a little contesting with one another, a little debate. But if we actually considered each other friends and showed respect and kindness to each other, we could honestly talk about differences and similarities, not be unwilling to admit there are some similarities and things that we would find common ground in, but also be able to talk about those differences. So I think that it does appear to Jill and I think to a growing voice within the evangelical world and the LDS community, that God is up to something, and we ought not to be so suspicious of it, not to be so worried about it, nervous about it, whatever the right phrase, and begin to engage it, participate. And I just love what's happening at higher education levels, because that is a critical moment. We were with Elder Holland and Pat with a leading evangelical just in 2019, and one of the questions that Elder Holland asked was to our guest, the speaker, the well-known evangelical speaker, was, "What is your greatest concern in the world today?" And one of the answers that this well-known speaker in the evangelical world gave to Jill and I and Elder Holland and Pat and another couple was that every year an army of young minds are being graduated from secular universities with worldviews that are very much against things of spirituality and biblical truth and biblical values and biblical ideas. Whereas there are many religious faith-based schools that are graduating students as well, our numbers are far fewer than the larger number of secular universities. And we're just getting theologically, we're becoming overwhelmed by those numbers. And while secularism is having its day, to be sure, I want to hold out hope for all of us that God is never undefended. He can defend and take care of himself. So even as the pendulum swings towards secularism, my money is on God and the truth of his word and the surety of faith in Jesus Christ to outmove and outmaneuver the tides of secularism in our own world, and a collaboration between Latter-day Saint scholars, presidents, leaders, with evangelical leaders just seems to be the hand of God, and something to be rejoicing about and seeing where it takes us in various ways.
Yep.
Lots of things to be.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, I just think, and President Reese, you're probably seeing this, but as the younger generation wants to be more authentic and not necessarily trusting in institutions, I really feel like God's hand is on that as well. And kind of goes along with what we've been talking about, is this humility as we come into relationship and authenticity, and really allowing the Holy Spirit to lead our relationships and our conversations, and it's becoming life-changing. And so even though we are seeing the secular, I think we're seeing also a rise of this authentic relationship with Christ among young people, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, Jill, I might have told you both about this before, but for your audience, I was with the head of the Pew study that tracks religious affiliation. And we all know the rise of the religious nuns in America, people who have no religious affiliation. And it was interesting. He said, everyone reports that. But he said, you know, I can get almost no media to cover the other side of this story. And he said, first, guess which religious affiliation has the lowest retention? And I guessed a couple different churches, and I was hoping it wasn't ours. And he said, the religious nuns.
Yeah.
Because while they go, and he said, one of the things people don't understand is religious nuns aren't atheists. They aren't even agnostic. They still believe in God, and they just haven't found a place for religion, but they go to the disaffiliation and they aren't happy.
Yeah.
And we know that. And you flee, you run away from Jesus Christ, you are not going to have the happiness you have when you're with the Savior. And I thought it was so interesting that they go to religious nun, but then they eventually reaffiliate. And I think it's a tremendous time for evangelicals, Christians more generally, people in our faith, to be a light and to show what following Jesus Christ does, and show the joy of believing. And I think that is, you know, the challenge may feel like, oh, people are attacking us. I think the better challenge is, this is a time where we need to all rise up together and be a light to those people who are struggling. And there's not going to be joy when people try to walk away from the Savior in their lives. And that's why I love being around evangelicals who really honor Christ, is they're inspiring to me. And I want to be more committed to the Savior, and I want to be a better person when I see people like that. And I would say the same thing I feel for our students. When they're around real Christian evangelical believers, what an example they can be for our students in our own faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Closing comment, President Reese?
Well, Jill, I couldn't agree more. And we do see this among these students who walk through our doors. So we even 5 years ago, with the rising trends in secularism, as you pointed out, we find so many students walk through our door and they want to make a difference in the world. And I think that's driven out of a sincere desire to follow Jesus Christ, to follow his perfect example. And it's that innate desire that gives me incredible hope. While we are graduating lots of students around the country at secular universities, we find that increases in a time when there's a decrease in applications to universities, increases at those who have a religious leaning. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is a remarkable testament to, I think, the hearts of these amazing young people. So I'm bullish on the future, and I'm super excited about what things lie ahead for these kids who have an opportunity to study in an atmosphere of faith. It is a remarkable thing, and it will depend critically on us, I mean the broader us, banding together and finding these commonalities, because we do so often have so much more in common than we have differences. And it is building on those things, those bridges that you all talk about, I think are going to be key.
It's that confederacy of righteousness idea that
Love it.
we are going to need to stand together, to coin a phrase from an organization I know that we lead, standing together. We're going to need to stand together in even our differences, to stand for righteousness, for value systems that really have driven this country and made our nation a great place for over 200 years. Jill and I just came back from a trip back east. We were at Mount Vernon yesterday. We were at the American Revolution Museum the day before, part of an assignment we had, or an opportunity we had. But we were amazed and encouraged again at what a ordination of God, the hand of God being on the founding fathers of our nation, and the responsibility we have as every new generation to uphold those sacrifices, those commitments of previous generations, to maintain the freedom, the greatness of our nation. So for all that, we thank you for this conversation. President Reese, we want you to know, again, we will be on campus first 2 Tuesdays of March with students from evangelical schools. We will go to the convocation, or the devotional, as you call it. We're going to hear Elder Runland speak next week, and we'll be in the audience as you're bringing leadership to that event. And then we'll head right over to the Wilkinson Center for a pizza lunch with about 45 students each week, meeting with about 45 Latter-day Saint students for a period of almost 2 hours to have conversations about theological and all things considered. So if you want to, if you have any time, it's not like you don't have any free time. I know you don't, but you should pop over and see it for yourself. It's really remarkable.
Absolutely.
And we'll be meeting with them on Thursday, the couple days later.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That sounds like a great, and let's catch up while you're here. It would be great to be able to take part in some of those activities.
Well, I do have Wendy's email, so I'll send her an email and see if we can make a connection. If not, we totally respect that. It is interesting that your wife and your assistant both have the same name.
No confusion there.
I bet there is a little bit. So anyways, thank you. God bless you guys. Appreciate your time and what you shared with us today. I hope our audience was encouraged as well. Thanks for joining us for Building Bridges with Greg and Jill. Hopefully you enjoyed this conversation and learned something about what's happening in the larger world of the LDS higher education, evangelical higher education world, but even more than that, what might be really in the hand of God in building bridges between our two communities for a new day and for the challenges at hand. So God bless you. Thank you. Please subscribe and like and leave some comments for us. We would love to respond to those. And thank you so much. We'll see you next month on Building Bridges with Greg and Jill.